We are continuing in the Sefer Likutim Tzemach Tzedek. In this volume, we are on page Tov Kuf Tet Vav. There will be 515, and we are in the second piece of the second part about Kabbalas Chiyusam, how the nations of the world receive their sustenance, their vitality, their life. And as most pieces, this is taken from the Tzemach Tzedek's series of the Or HaTorah. Okay, so in the middle of the page, the second paragraph, Tov Kuf Tes Vav. V'inyan shehamakif mechaye, that which we're saying, that it's the makif, the all-encompassing aura, which is what they want to tap into, and that's what gives life. Yuvan will be understood. Al derech shelamata, similar to how we have down here in this physical world, o aryeh, the actual physical lion, hu chaya tmeya. Did we do this one? I'm wondering if we did it. Well, any rate, if not, it's review, but I'm pretty sure we did it. I think we're up to the next piece.
Oh, you think we went through two? Okay.
I think so, but
I don't remember that one. I do remember talking about the lion, and you're supposed to put the behemoth, and then it receives a bird,
well, let's do it.
and
Okay.
then the fire, from the.
Yeah, but okay. So we say that in the Merkava, in the Holy Chariot, in the vision of Yechezkel, so one of the sides, there is the Pnei Aryeh, the face of the lion, and then there's the Pnei Shor, the face of the ox. But when you go down the Ishtalshalus, the whole down chain, until you finally end up coming down in this physical world to the physical lion, Uchayatmeya, that is a non-kosher, impure animal, meaning that it's getting its vitality from the Gimel Klipas Atmeis, from the completely non-holy klipos. Bashur, but then the ox, behemoth, down here, the ox is a pure, kosher animal. So that's how it is down here. So down here, an ox is kosher, and a Jew may eat it. A lion is non-kosher, and a Jew may not eat it. Uvisharsham on the second line. Uvisharsham, but if you go back in their roots of the lion and the ox, actually, the lion is higher, superior in level to the ox. Because as it says in the verse in the chariot of Yechezkel, that the face of the lion is to the right, and we know that right is above left, etc. So how come it ends up down here that the higher one ends up falling lower and is impure, tameh, and the lower one of the two down here is tahira, is pure? How does that work? So he answers that by explaining as follows. Ella, just rather, mipnei, because, shehu, that he or it, bimadrega gavoya, is in such a high level, is a very high level, this lion in its spiritual source in the Merkava. Lachain, therefore, kishenofal bishviras hakelim, when it fell with the whole process of the smashing, the breaking of the vessels of the world of chaos, of toihu, as we are about to explain. Ein loy hislapshus. So now this very, very high level of the lion doesn't have the ability, it doesn't enclose itself bishli, in a vessel, limata bikadusha, down when you're dealing with sanctity, with holiness. There's no vessel for it to be able to enclose itself in. Ki'im, just rather, shenafal, that it fell, B'derech nefilas ha'or, in a way of the light falling. B'rapach nitzutzin, in the 288 sparks, shebishviras hakelim, that are in the story of the breaking of the vessels. Begimel klipos atmeyos, in the three completely impure klipos atmeyos, which are impure.
He's saying that's in Rapach?
Yeah, Rapach is the 288
Right.
sparks.
Huh.
But in them, they fell so low that they go down to the three klipos atmeyos,
Really?
and therefore it ends up being an impure animal. Meaning, in the source, it's very high, and then when the shviras hakelim takes place, so because it's so high, there isn't really a vessel in kedusha for this energy of the spiritual lion to enclose in. And therefore what's left is that it ends up falling into the klipa part.
That would be the left side then, though, huh? Or no? I thought klipo timeot were in the left. And
Well,
Rapach was the middle.
I don't know about that.
Okay.
In a sense, the three klipas tameos are, so to say, off the chart because they're tame.
Right. I still thought that was from the left side, like the harsh Gevura side, which is why the negative mitzvahs are from Gevura.
Right.
So that's why I'm confused.
Uh-huh.
I'm not saying my view is right. I'm just telling you where I'm at, I guess, in relation.
I hear you. Right, I hear you. Okay. So now that it resulted in being tamei, impure, the lion down here in the physical, mikabel, receives hachayus, its life, minefilas hanitzutzin, from the falling of the sparks, mehoarye shalamaila, from the lion above. Shehu, that is, hiskabrus ha'or, the intensification, the intensity, the overpowering of the or, of the light, me'oid, very much, mibchinas makif, in a sense of makif. You know, it's so intense that it ends up being a makif which cannot enclose itself into any vessel. And because of that, the lion ends up receiving its chayus, its life, from this high level, but it itself, the lion then ends up, like it, when all the chips are in fall and everything is in place, so it ends up down here that the lion is actually impure. Which is not the case. Pnei shoyer, the face of the ox. Mipnei, because shulamata b'madrega, because it's a lower level, because the ox up there in its source is a lower level than the lion. Yachoil, for that very reason, so to say, its downside, in a sense, is actually its redeeming factor. So because it's lower, it can come al yedei ribuy hatzimtzumim, through the enormous amount of contractions, v'ishtalshelus, and all of this downchaining, ulihislabesh, and to become enclosed, vichlid kedusha, in a vessel of kedusha, v'vehema tahirachulu, in a pure behema. So now that energy, that spiritual level of the shur, of the ox, can end up coming down here and being a kosher, pure animal, because it can go through all of these various different contractions. It doesn't remain this intensely high or makif. So in other words, it comes out that even though makif is higher, But practically speaking, for us in this physical world, at the end of the day, it could be a very big problem. You need to have it in the vessels.
Right. You can't manipulate it. It's too hard, right? Like, because that's how Makif is how the Gimel Klipot Tameot receive its life force, right? From a Makif. Right. Okay.
And now, interestingly, look at what he says. Ve'al derech zeh, the acronym Vav Ayin Dalet Zayin, ve'al derech zeh, and along the same lines, similarly, Yuvan will be understood. Inyan Yaakov ve'Esav.
Wow.
The idea of the twin brothers. Yaakov, that Yaakov, Nikra, he's called in the verse, B'na HaKatan, her small, meaning literally here, or in context, or younger, but it's her small son. And that's why his name is Yud Akev. The letter Yud, and Akev means the heel, as in the heel of the foot. Meaning, Shehayud Utzimtzum. Yud being the smallest physical letter in the way that you write it or draw it, represents an enormous type of a tzimtzum, of contraction. Every letter represents something else, especially in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. So the Vav represents Hamshacha, drawing down. It's like a straight line. It's a pump. It's a pipe from above coming down. But the Yud is just a dot, basically. So that's condensing everything. That's the Tzimtzum. Shayudu Tzimtzum Ha'ar Nikuda Chuli. It's just a point. The Esav, what does the verse say about Esav? Nikra b'na hagadol. He is called her big son, or in context, her older son. So really, Esav seemingly should be greater than Yaakov. Ella, so how come it ended up playing itself out that over here, Yaakov is the Jew, Yaakov is Kedusha, and Esav is Edom, is Klipa, etc., and he was evil. Ella, rather, mipnei, because sheYaakov haya merkava. Yaakov was, as it says in the Zohar about the Avos, the forefathers, he was a chariot for the will of Hashem. So he automatically did exactly what Hashem wants. Just like you have a wagon or a car, whatever it would be, a vehicle, that it has no will of its own. Whatever the rider does, turns this way, turns that way, whatever he does, that's what it automatically does. So Yaakov was a Merkava, he was a chariot, he was a vehicle. Gilui or ein soif, in other words, a revelation of the infinite light of Hashem himself. Bifnimis, in an internal way. Bichli, in a vessel. In other words, it is enclosed inside a vessel. So it's light, godly energy inside a contained vessel. The efshar, and that's impossible to be like that. Ki'im, only al yedei tzimtzum ha'or. Only by contracting the great light, because talking about infinite light. So the only way that it can come into a vessel is if you contract it, if you condense it.
Yeah, you can't be great in order to do that. You have to be small, so to speak.
Right. You have to. So B'chinas Yud, that's the idea of the letter Yud. So it's not an acronym. A lot of times when we want to write out a word, or in this case, to write out a letter, so we actually spell it out. Yud Vav Dalid spells Yud. Don't get confused. It's not an acronym.
Yeah, that would have drove me crazy.
Yeah, sometimes we just make like 2 lines above. You see the Yud with that one little line after it?
Yes.
That's one way to do it. Or, as here, it's spelled out with, then you have the 2 lines between the last and second to last letter.
Oh, thank you. Excellent.
Yeah. So that's the Yud of Yaakov, which is contraction, condensing it, and therefore now it's no longer in a revealed sense on a very, very high level, because you want to bring whatever level it is to be contained in a vessel. So that's pnimius, that's internal. The Esav, but on the other hand, in contrast to that, Esav, Haya, not Hayud, and don't get confused. We're just writing it because we don't want to, and a lot of times want to avoid putting letters of Hashem's tetragrammaton name next to each other. So sometimes you'll write Hey, Yud, and then just that line.
And that's what that is there. Is that it?
Haya, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's really Hey, Yud, Hey, but we don't want to write it like that.
Right, thank you.
The Esav Haya, B'chor. Esav was the firstborn. U derech nefilas ha'or. That is the path, the way of the falling down of not just the descent, but the how should I say, the downfall. The downfall, literally, of the light, mi bechinas, from the concept or the aspect of Zayin Melachim, of the 7 kings, the Toyu of Toyu. In other words, the world of Toyu, of chaos, is primarily all about the midos, the attributes of the heart, the emotions. There's not so much about moichin, about the intellect. There is intellect, but the main thing is the 7 midos, the 7 emotions.
And is that because
yeah,
the mochin didn't fully fall, but the 7 did, and then that's the way you collect them?
And even to begin with, in that world, before the level of the breaking and the falling, it's primarily about emotions.
And could I interject and say that also has something to do with Sheva mitzvahs, maybe?
That's a very good point.
Okay.
I don't recall ever seeing that, but nothing is, coincidental.
Right. Okay.
And we do know that the Sheva mitzvahs correspond to the 7 midos.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm...
Yeah. So the 7 kings of Toyu. Now, the thing is, they're called kings because that's precisely what the problem is in the world of Toyu. The intensity and the non-incorporation and the non-inclusiveness. Every midah there, even though it's such a high level of kedusha, that's exactly the problem. It's such a high level that every midah there is 100% in its full, energy and power. It's non-compromising. It's intensity. It's very, very intense. So the midah of chesed is 100% chesed. It does not include or incorporate anything other than chesed. And then you have the opposite. So you have 7 holy kings, but each one of them, instead of working together, it's not a government where you have 7 officers and each one has his function or whatever. King means a monarch who's in charge of the whole thing, and no one can tell him what to do. At best, he can have some advisors. So if you got 7 kings, you're setting yourself up for chaos.
Oh, thank you for that explanation. That was excellent.
So you have the 7 kings of the Toyu, of the world of Toyu. Shemolchu, that they reigned, Be'eretz Edom. And where were they? In the land of Edom.
Yeah.
That's Esav. And their names are listed at the end of, I think it's the parsha of Vayishlach. So at the end over there,
chapter 34 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that in Beis. So over there it says Vayimloich Vayomas Hulu, and it just lists them real quick. It says he reigned and died. And the next one reigned and died. Next one, it doesn't even tell us how long each one was. Like, doesn't tell us much at all in the Chumash. But each one of them, it says the words Vayimloich Vayomas. He reigned, he was king, and he died. Bishvira Sakelim. And that is the story over there in the Chumash. That is the story of the smashing of these vessels of the world of Toyu, which that's really the level of Esav. That's Edom. So now let's go down here. The Esav down here in this physical world, not up there in the world of Toyu, which is the source and the roots, but down here, the Esav down here, Mikabel receives Hachayus, the vitality, Bibchinas Makif, from this Makif, Misharashoy, from its root. Zayin Milachim Anal and Iskar Leil. The 7 above mentioned kings.
Oh.
Al derech, similar, shemekabel ha'aryeh mishar shoy kanal kanitz Leil. Just like the lion of the Merkava receives from its root, its source. So we're basically saying that Esav down here, Esav down here is like the lion down here. Meaning, if you go to their source, actually they are higher. They're the makif. But the way it comes down here, it ends up being negative and it ends up becoming impure. So the lion ends up down here being impure, even though up there it's higher than the ox. And Esav down here ends up being no good, even though in his source, he's actually higher than Yaakov. Okay, next piece, another short piece.
Okay.
And last 2 lines of the page.
Okay.
Ulahavin mashal. We want to understand, want to give a parable. Hu bechinas makif. How does this work with makif? We're saying makif is much, much higher, and that's where the klipas get their vitality from. But because of that, it ends up falling very, very low because makif cannot, by its nature, by definition, it can't come into the vessels.
Unlike klipat noga, we're talking about the gimel klipot here.
Okay. The gimel, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Who? So we're going to give a mashal. K'moy, like shenefesh ha'adam, man's soul, migulgal bivehema, can end up rolling in, or as they say in English, getting reincarnated into an animal. A human soul can end up being in an animal. So what happens at that point? What's going on? Hare'ein me'ira. So at that point, it's not illuminating or shining bifnimis in an internal way. Ki ein kli habehema, because the vessels of the animal, kain klei habehema, the vessels of the animal are not muchanim, ready or susceptible, likabel, to receive suras nefesh ha'adam, the form of the human soul, which is seichel umidois, intellect and emotions. Rak hisham b'vchinas makif. So what does it mean that the human soul is in an animal? It's just in a way of makif. In other words, don't become what do you call it? Like in comics or
personification.
No. When something like they in cartoons and all that, where they give these animals these human features all the time, like Disney does that all the time.
Anthropomorphism.
Yeah.
Anthropomorphism.
Whatever.
No.
Yeah. Well. In other words, we're saying that's not reality. Don't think that when you hear or somewhere it says that a human nefesh, a human soul, is in an animal, don't think that that animal now is in its consciousness functioning like a human, or or it's like any of these fictitious things. I mean, there are all these books and cartoons and movies that Walt Disney has. Of how a person is like in an animal. I think they have one of those about a dog. A person became a dog or something.
Oh, the Prince and the Frog or whatever. The frog's a prince. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, or right, all those kinds of stuff. Or they have I don't know. They have another one about a person becoming a dog. I don't know. Whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
So that's not how it works, because The human body and the physical brain and heart, those are vessels to contain the spiritual nefesh of a person. An animal can only have a nefesh of an animal. And for whatever reason, when Hashem does place the soul of a person in an animal, it's only makif. And therefore, the animal in its consciousness is, like, so to say, not aware that it has in it a nefesh of a person. Or alternatively, give another mashal. K'moy tinoik. Take an infant. Kishenoilad, when he's born, yesh by haneshama. So he has the soul. And it's the soul, the spiritual soul that we cannot see, that is actually giving him life. That's what makes the infant alive. And yet, nonetheless, even though he has a neshama inside of him, it is not shining internally in his intellect, in his brain, in his mind. Meaning, that they, the infants, are not misugalim, able. They're not able. What's a better word in English? Yeah, they don't.
Able sounds
they don't
pretty
have,
good.
They don't have the ability. Yeah, they're not able.
Capability. Yeah.
Right, they're not capable. Thank you. Lekabel, to receive. In other words, you can't explain to them intellectual concepts. They say, what do you mean? They have a physical brain and they have a neshama in their brain. Why can't they understand concepts? Why can't you explain things to an infant? Mipnei, because katnus hakelim, because their vessels are so small. So in other words, their brain and their intellect are too small. They're undeveloped. Im kain, if so, ma sheyesh boy, that which he has in him, nefesh hatzichlis, the intellectual soul, which he does have, zehu, this is rak, merely, only, bechinas makif. So yes, so is the child alive? Yes. Does the child have a brain? Yes. Does the child have a soul enclosed in him? Yes. So then what's the problem? Why can't he understand? Because his vessels are so small and undeveloped yet. Therefore, all of the above that he does have, his soul that he has in his body, is only merely in a way of makif, of all-encompassing. And therefore, practically speaking, it doesn't work. Just like the lion practically is not kosher, and just like Esav down here practically is not good, so too, when, or like the previous example we just gave, that when the soul of a person is enclosed in an animal, practically it doesn't function. So to over here, practically, at this point, the child or the infant can't function intellectually because it's makif. So it's actually higher, but that's exactly the downside and the problem. And now, after all of this, comes, so to say, the punchline. Ve'al derech kol zeh, and along these lines, along all of what we said until now, Yuvan will be understood, she haOmos haOlam, that the nations of the world, the non-Jewish nations, oimrim, what do they say? Ram al kol goyim chuli, exalted above all nations, etc., is Hashem. Meaning, shemekablim achayus elikus, they are receiving the life, the godliness, mi bechinas makiv de levoina chulu. They're receiving it from the makif of the frankincense. Remember, we said last time there are really only 10 in kedusha and in klipa, and yet there's 11 ingredients in the ketores, because number 11 is, or the extra one, so to say, is the Levina, and that's a Makif. So they're receiving from the Makif, which is really, in its source, higher than everything, but practically down here, because nothing can contain it, and it's not a proper vessel, so they just remain with the Makif. So to have Makif and receive from Makif translates down here into klipa and impurity and total concealment of Hashem.
Wow. I'm gonna have to listen to this one again. This is a lot. Very good.
All right. Fine, we'll stop here.
Okay, excellent. Hit the